Can we make an income disclosure statement for small business ownership? And if so, what would the numbers look like compared to multi-level marketing companies? Let's talk about it. Hi, my name is Nicole Willette. I own a marketing company called Breaking Even Communications that I opened in January of 2008, which means I've been in business almost 17 years. In addition to the marketing company, I have started 2 co-working spaces, one in Bar Harbor, Maine that was opened in April of 2015, and one in Potsdam, New York that was opened in January of 2019. Clearly, for my own life, I am a fan of small business ownership. Now, because I am a middle-aged American woman, I have also had my share of multi-level marketing experience. I have friends, family members who have been in or are currently in multi-level marketing companies. In addition to that, I have had several clients that are in multi-level marketing companies. I just want to acknowledge at the beginning of this video that working as a 1099 contractor for commissions on sales is a lot different than owning your own business. Some of the reasons we'll talk about today. And in case this is your first time on my channel, a few caveats before we start. Number one, I'm not one of those people who thinks that everybody should own a small business. Like any life decision, small business ownership has a list of pros and cons associated. And what you want to do is weigh them for yourself. For example, a giant con, this is how much money is owed to me right now for work I've already done. It's not all rainbows and unicorns over here, and I'm not here to pretend it is. I just want to present a more complete picture of the numbers of MLM distributorship versus business ownership so that you can make the right decision for yourself if you're deciding between those two things. A second thing is, this is a small channel. And sometimes when people come across this channel and they disagree with me, they will leave a comment saying, "Oh, you don't have a lot of subscribers. You must not know what you're talking about." And I challenge you to understand that there are whole groups of people who have a presence online, even if it's not large, and their goal or their time spent has not been in building and monetizing an audience. In short, if you are just going to discredit everything I say because of the size of my audience, I have survived 17 years in a very competitive, fast-changing, male-dominated industry. So obviously I must have some skill sets in addition to the luck I've had to get to this point. And thirdly, I'm just going to say I have spent approximately 5 hours researching this video. It's not a lot, but I'm also saying that the numbers that I have are either from documents provided by the multi-level marketing companies themselves or from reputable places like the SBDC and SCORE and other organizations that serve small businesses here in the US. If you have additional data that you want me to include in the spreadsheet that I'm going to show later, and I will also link in the show notes, you can email that to me. And the best way to do that is to use the contact form of our website, breakingeveninc.com/contact. And so you can, put links in there or add notes or anything that you want. And I can, over time, update the spreadsheet. And maybe I can even make a second video with the additional data that I gather from folks who are watching this who might have some additional perspective and things for me to consider. In my research, I found stats related to failure rate of small businesses versus MLMs, of startup costs of small businesses versus MLMs, and of sort of female friendliness of small businesses versus MLMs. So if any of those topics interest you more than the other, I'm happy to do a follow-up video. By the way, all this data is based here in the US, whether it's a US-based company's income disclosure statement for their US distributors, or whether it's data about small businesses here in the United States. It's not to be excluding of other countries. I just didn't want to get into currency exchanges and all that. So if somebody somewhere else wants to make a similar video, I think that would be super interesting, and you should tell me that you made it so I can go watch it. Let's start with the fundamental difference in how multi-level marketing companies versus small businesses report on their financials. Multi-level marketing companies here in the United States have the option of providing an income disclosure statement, but they don't have to. And these income disclosure statements can vary in terms of level of detail and amount of data. And what I thought was really funny in my research is the company that offered the least amount of data was Primerica, of the ones that I looked at. Here on the screen is their entire income disclosure statement that I was able to find. So in case you don't want to read that whole paragraph, the only number in there is $7,185 is what the average person in Primerica makes. And to be clear, that is an average or a mean in terms of the type of number it is. One of the more detailed income disclosure statements that I looked at was Monat's. And as you see here, they have an average gross earnings, and then they have a sort of low and a high annual gross earnings at each of the income levels. Before we get into my spreadsheet, I want to go over some basic math stuff just to refresh you in case you haven't done fourth grade math in a while. I certainly haven't. The average or mean is the sum of all the values divided by the total number of values. And this is helpful when the data is evenly distributed, but it can be skewed low or high if there are outliers. In this example, there are 5 people. One person makes $10,000, 2 people each make $20,000, one person makes $25,000, and one person makes $100,000. So if you add up all those values and divide it by 5, you get $35,000. Looking at these people, none of them make $35,000, and actually 4 out of 5 of them make less than that. So this number doesn't necessarily feel representative, although it is a representation of the data. The median is the middle value when the numbers are arranged in order. So we arrange them from lowest to highest or highest to lowest, and we go to the number in the middle. And if there is 2 numbers in the middle, we average those 2 numbers to get the median. And the median kind of works better when you're looking at data where there are outliers. And if we look at the same example, but with median data, we see that the median is $20,000. And that feels a lot more representative of the data because actually 2 people make $20,000. Now, I think the reason that people mix up or use the words mean and median interchangeably, even though they are different values, besides the fact that they sound alike and you probably learned about both concepts the same week in your fourth grade math class, is that when the data is kind of close enough together, the numbers could be the same or very similar. Let's look back at the Monat income disclosure statement. The very middle column is the average annual gross earnings. And if we look at the lowest annual earnings of the lowest level, which is $0, and then we look at the highest level earnings of the highest level, $1.7 million, we understand that the data we're looking at probably has outliers. And so these means or these averages probably aren't like the most accurate way to represent the data. But even more importantly than this, if you're looking at this table, it's very tempting for you to count the fact that there are 11 rows. And then you can say, okay, I'm just going to add up all of the numbers and the averages, and I'm going to divide it by 11. Here's the problem with that. If we look at the lowest level, the market partner level, we see that 91% of the company is at that level. And if we look at the senior director level, we see that 0.01% of the company is at that level. So we can't count these numbers the same way. Each row does not represent an equal amount of people. So what we have to do to actually calculate this stuff is use weighted averages, or if we had median data, weighted medians. Now, weighted means or weighted medians, depending on what the company provides in the income disclosure statement, obviously are more complicated mathematically to do than the example of the mean and the median that I did just 5 minutes ago. So I had a choice to make about explaining the math, and I hope I've made the right one. Let me tell you about the choice I didn't make, which is doing the math on camera. Do I have a whiteboard at my office? Yes. Do I have the ability to do this math long form? Also, yes. But was I confident that people would stick through the 5 minutes of showing how weighted averages work to finish the rest of the video? I was not confident that would happen. Also, I was thinking if some people thought I was trying to be biased or whatever, they would think that I was tricking people with the math. So here is what I've done instead. In the show notes of this video, which is obviously too long to include in YouTube's standard description, I have included the ChatGPT prompts that I typed in to do the weighted means or the weighted medians for different companies. And if you don't trust my math, you can take those and put them into ChatGPT yourself and not only see what the number is and the fact that it's the same as the number that's in my spreadsheet, but you can see how the math was done as well if you want to do these things yourself. Or if you have a different multi-level marketing company, you could obviously adjust the prompt, put it in, and get these numbers for any multi-level marketing company. So there you go. I thought that was a good way around it. It shows the proof, but also doesn't take a ton of time in the video. So let's take a look at my spreadsheet. On the screen right now, I'm only showing 2 line items because these were the only 2 things I had both mean and median data for: Sensi and small business ownership. Where I got the small business ownership data was through 8 different links that reflect national data. And so those are linked in the show notes if you want to check out what those are. I did find a resource that had it broken down by state, but it didn't have all the states. Like Maine wasn't in there. So I didn't include data from that, although if they would have had all 50 states, I might have actually inputted. But honestly, the numbers were pretty similar. I believe that the lowest was kind of in the mid 20,000 range. I forget if it was 25 or 28. And then the upper level was like 75,000 in terms of averages. And that seemed to vary mostly by location, obviously also probably by industry and all that. But if we look at the average and the median of small business ownership, they're pretty close. And what that means is that this data doesn't have massively huge outliers. So if we look at Sensi, the difference between those 2 numbers is relatively large. Yes, it's an actual smaller number than the difference between 49,650 and 48,489. But if we're talking proportions, you see that those numbers are further apart from each other, which indicates that that data set probably has some low and some high outliers, which when we expand out, we're going to see. Now, expanding out to see the whole thing, you see here that MLM income disclosure statements are not all formatted the same way. They don't all provide the same data. So what I did is I filled in what I could. And then for the average and the median, I did weighted averages or weighted medians. And then for some of these, because they had more detailed data about the top 10% of all of the ranks, I did weighted averages for those as well. A little bit more about this data. The data that has the most range is Monat. So their average is $888, but their top level earnings average is $950,467. Now we know Monat has been under fire recently for possibly changing their comp plan and not telling people that they did that because people's checks have apparently been quite low. So I'm wondering how much these numbers are going to change in the next year. And then the other kind of fun piece of data is if we look at Amway, we see that the top level earnings average is $41,456 per year. And the years it takes to achieve the top rank average ranges from 4 to 12 years on average. So you could spend 12 years trying to make $41,000 a year, which is nuts to me. Whether we look at averages or medians, however we dice it up, the income earning potential of small business ownership is significantly higher than multi-level marketing income. And even if I took the lowest data point that I found, which is from the US Chamber of Commerce, which says that the average income for unincorporated businesses was $26,084 a year, that's still way higher than the incomes that are on the screen associated with multi-level marketing companies. Let's talk a little bit in more detail about how small businesses versus multi-level marketing companies report out on their data. So multi-level marketing companies have what are called income disclosure statements, which is what we used to make a spreadsheet and something that is typically provided on the multi-level marketing company's website. Again, this is an optional thing. They don't have to provide it, but a lot of them do. And the income disclosure statement shows an income, whether it's a mean or a median or both, and often shows a range of incomes that people can make within the company at the different levels. And so what the company does is at the end of the year, they issue to each MLM distributor a 1099. And the 1099 reflects the amount that that company paid out to that representative. And to remind you, oftentimes these bonuses or these trips or whatever are included toward your income, even if they're not cash. And what businesses have is what's called a balance sheet. Although in terms of tax reporting purposes, there are some business structures where you just have to fill out a statement of revenue and expenses versus submitting your balance sheet when you pay your taxes. But the idea of the balance sheet is it shows income and expenses of the company. And At the bottom, you subtract the expenses from the income, and there's a number that's either positive or negative, showing whether the business made money or the business lost money that particular year. Have I had years where my balance sheet is a negative number? Yes, I have. Multiple years even. And here's the thing, like, part of small business ownership is things are up and things are down. And even if you have done the work, sometimes the money hasn't come in yet. There's a reason that these multi-level marketing companies only have income disclosure statements, and it's the fact that they have no idea how much their distributors are spending in terms of expenses on running their business. It's not like, for example, everyone in Monat, like, I get my 1099 from Monat, I submit my taxes to the US government. I don't send a copy to Monat and then someone at Monat doesn't get my taxes and say, oh, Nicole spent $10,000 last year, but she only made $6,000. And they don't track that for everybody because obviously that would be a lot of work. But the more cynical reason is that probably the numbers that we just looked at would look even worse if they counted expenses. Oftentimes you have like a minimum sales volume, and sometimes if you can't sell that to other people, you'll end up buying it yourself. Sometimes there's website fees, there's, conference registrations and expenses going to the conferences. There's, tools that you use. Maybe you have the pro version of Zoom or the pro version of Canva, things like that. And these companies have no idea what distributors are spending. And I think, honestly, unless distributors do their own taxes separately, they probably don't know either. Now, I say they probably don't know because if you're, joint filing your taxes or something, and your partner makes a lot more money than you do, and you haven't pulled out your business as a separate thing that has income and expenses and looked at that objectively and separately, you might not know that you're actively losing money or actively at a zero balance for multiple years in a row. Any company, whether it's a small business or one of these MLM companies that's privately owned, we don't know exactly what any business's finances look like. Anything that's a publicly traded company, obviously they have to report, sort of quarterly earnings and things like that. So there is a record of that kind of stuff. But if you're a private company, you can kind of do whatever you want. And obviously, we only have a partial picture here, both of small business ownership and of multi-level marketing companies. In conclusion, numbers and hips don't lie. You are infinitely more likely to make a livable wage as a small business owner than you are as a multi-level marketing distributor. Now, there are some people who probably want to argue with me in the comments, but Nicole, look at the upper levels of income in these income disclosure statements. If I'm great at multi-level marketing, I can make way more money at that than at small business ownership. In the show notes is a link to the highest income multi-level marketing distributors and a link to the highest earning business owners. And there isn't even a contest there. There are over 3 million small businesses in the United States that make over $1 million. How many people in all the multi-level marketing companies in existence in the United States, how many people in those companies make over $1 million? I bet it's a lot less than 3 million of them. As this spreadsheet fills out with more companies, we'll have more and more data points, and we can revisit my conclusion here. But I have a feeling that additional numbers will strengthen the conclusion rather than refute it. And before you say, but Nicole, I don't have $50,000 or $100,000 to start a business. You don't have to start a restaurant. You don't have to start a retail store. You don't have to start something that costs a lot of money. You can start a local service-based small business. Own a lawnmower and like being outside? Congratulations, you can start a lawn mowing business. You only have Saturdays off? Great. You can look at your schedule and say, oh, I can fit 4 lawns in my Saturday. And that's the amount of people you schedule. And as you're mowing lawns and you think, oh, I can buy a better lawnmower and then I can mow 8 lawns on my Saturday. You could take some of your profits from your business and you can buy a better lawnmower and scale it up from there. Oh, do you like children and can pass a background check? You can be a babysitter and you can start babysitting services. Are you good at social media? You can maintain social media accounts for local businesses and nonprofits. Do you like editing video? You can set up an account on various online sites or even tell local business owners that you can edit their videos for them. The possibilities are endless and you don't have to spend a lot of money on it. And if you don't believe me, I have two book recommendations. One is $100 Startup by Chris Guillebeau. And his follow-up book to that is called Side Hustles. They both have a ton of case studies in them about how people have started businesses with their spare time and with little to no money. And sometimes they've kept it as a side business. Sometimes they've grown it to a full-time thing. Sometimes they've grown it to such a level they've hired a team. But there is more than one way to approach anything. And your small business, because you're building it, can be tailored to your skills, to your schedule, and all of that. That's all I got. Thanks so much for watching. If you like content about business and marketing, you should subscribe to this YouTube channel. Or if you want to sort of lightly keep in touch, a good way to do that is through our monthly email newsletter, breakingeveninc.com/newsletter to sign up. And remember, if you want to see the sources and all of that, there is a very detailed Google Doc linked in the show notes below. See you in the next video and take care.